To have you here. We've got Kevin Hughes, the senior vice president at Builtwell Bank. We're really excited. So this is going to be leadership across the table, and this is our leadership series that we're putting on as Beacon Legacy Group. And really, you're our inaugural guest today, and so we're so excited to have you. Really, our mission statement is to highlight leaders across a variety of industries across our region, so that we all can learn from each other. And so, without further ado, we'll jump in today. You're in the banking industry. I'm curious if you could just kind of give us an update on what led you to banking and more about your current role as the senior vice president at the bank.
Well, thank you for having me, Tyler, and no pressure with the inaugural
Yeah, you're the first one up.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate that. But I'll just tell you, as far as in banking, what happened with me is a little unusual. I've actually been with the bank for 33 years now, same bank.
Yeah.
And whenever I got into banking, it was because I found out there was a position open at a local bank. Back then, I just had been in school, but these kind of positions weren't like they are today. A lot of positions open at banks, and people jump back and forth. But back then,
it was a big deal.
It was a big deal to be able to at least get a shot at one. So I took that shot. I got the position, and I just started learning, on the job training. Did a lot of different positions in the bank. Was a branch manager for a number of years, and today I'm a commercial lender for the bank.
And really, what does that entail as the senior vice president? Like, kind of, what's your general duties at this phase? You've gone for 3 decades, working your way through the bank to this current position. And can you kind of give an overview of, in general, what you do as the senior vice president?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, Tyler, and those years of experience have been everything I've been able to build on to get me to this point.
Sure.
What I do. While I say I'm a commercial lender and take care of commercial customers, every customer is really my customer. And so I've got people that I've dealt with for 30 years that still come to me, and as they have needs, I take care of them, make sure they're taken care of. I'm able to understand if they need something depository wise. Doesn't have to do with the business loan.
Yeah.
But I can make sure those kind of people are taken care of. And where I've dealt with employees, it just enables me to do a little bit of everything.
Exactly, which is why you're at multiple branches, and so you're working with personnel there at the bank, but also your relationships across this region, which is why we asked you to come in. As a local business owner here in the region, one of your primary duties is commercial lending, largely to business owners and investors, and that's something that the public just doesn't understand. It is so critical to have a banker on the side of business owners, because having access to liquidity and debt, those are the tools for the majority of businesses. Absolutely. That allow them to scale. And I'm just curious if you could share a success story or really share kind of your critical role in a business on how they're going from maybe a seed startup to a larger business.
What a lot of people don't understand, how a community bank is different than maybe a commercial bank is.
Yep.
How we operate is we take local deposits from local depositors. We don't have any funny money that we get from anywhere else. And we invest that in our local community. And that's what separates us, is that we're investing your money into you and the business owners. So basically, the money we invest in business owners is the engine for this community. I mean, really, because they're the ones that employ the local people. They're the ones that have the local funds that stay here. So, I mean, it just all cycles together. And what that means for a local business owner is, they may go from, well, I'll give you an example of somebody that I've got, a great success story. It was a gentleman who worked for a successful company. He was very high up in the company and decided that it was time for him to do his own thing.
Yep.
Okay. Now, having the idea of being able to do your own thing and the game plan is two different things.
Absolutely.
I met a lot of business owners that have really great ideas, but they don't know how to get there.
Yeah.
And that's where we step in. That's my role, is to help them figure out how they can get there.
Also, just educating them on how this whole lending thing works.
Because somebody may be able to know how to make a gadget, but being able to get that gadget to market and be able to understand that they need the cash flow so they get their money in from their receivables and all those things, that they need to help with that.
Yeah.
And they didn't know how to be able to get the capital to be able to make that gadget.
And again, I just think it's so understated that the general public, it's not that they don't want to know, but if you don't own a business, you don't know. And we did happen to bootstrap this business, but we're a service based company. It's easier to do. Again, the vast majority of businesses need access to that local bank to grow that firm. That is how capitalism 101 really operates. And one thing I didn't know that you just shared was really one of the primary differences. You hear about these regional banks that sometimes they lever up too much and they feel the strain whenever interest rates go up and things like that. Whereas local banks, actually, it sounds like the engine that actually grows the bank too is investing in those businesses, and their success is directly tied to the bank. Would that be a fair assessment?
Absolutely. And the difference is too, whenever I meet with a business owner, a potential business owner, I actually look at them eyeball to eyeball and understand what they're actually trying to do. There's a difference in applying on the internet for a loan or talking to somebody on the phone. Then, I actually go out to the workplace and I want to see what they're doing. I want to make sure I understand what they're doing, because I can't give somebody good advice if I don't know what they're doing, if I don't understand them and understand what their needs may be. And being able to do that over and over again, that helps me counsel somebody else in a different business. So back to the guy that I was talking about.
Okay.
He had this idea for his business. We helped him get started small, but then he wanted to grow really quick, and he needed an avenue to do that. We were able to work through that avenue with him, and today he's got multiple businesses because of that. He's been able to do spinoffs from his original business because
and you were involved from the very first.
And we started from the beginning with him. So, yes, he's a great advocate, and that's the best word of mouth advertising we can get is somebody like that.
You're going out eyes on. You've got to see, number one, can we make this work? It also makes that business owner better, because to make it work, it's got to have to show, like, how is this operationally going to work from a profitability standpoint? And again, that local banker from day one was really intricate in them growing and probably the overall success to their plan. Going back to this idea of having a local bank versus, JP Morgan or, Bank of America, these really large banks which serve a role in our society, local community and programs, are there any initiatives that, like, for instance, Builtwell does, right here in the plateau that outside of commercial lending to owners that you're proud of or that you'd want to share with our group here?
As far as like business owners, we have one proprietary receivable financing that we do for them. We're the only one in the area that does that. And that helps our business owners be able to grow. Most people can't get larger contracts because they don't have the cash flow to be able to handle those until the time they get the receivable in.
Yes.
So that kills a lot of growth for some small business owners. So we have that. As far as our involvement in the community, we have a lot of give back. We're connected with the Habitat, Rotary programs. One thing that we're really proud of is we have a food drive we do annually. And as a bank, last year we collected enough for 450,000 cans. So that makes a difference in the community. And that's what we're about. It's about making a difference financially and making a difference as an impact what we can do with the resources we have.
There is this greater fear that these larger banks, they are too large to fail, and they're going to continue to take up more and more of the market share, which is a recipe for disaster for our local communities, because our banks are so intricate to our personal families as well as the business owners, and that again illustrates that.
And not to bash commercial banks or big banks, but just to give you an example, we had someone who decided that they needed to be at a big bank, one of our former customers.
Okay.
And they decided to do that. They were going to get attractive rates. And, sometimes when it's just about the rate, that's all people look at, right?
And that's how they make their decision.
But that could be a double-edged sword. In this particular instance, this was a business owner. And sometimes these larger banks decide, okay, we want to be out of an industry. And so they just cut people off. This guy, they cut off his line of credit overnight and took all of his money that was in his deposit account.
Yeah,
and
those stories are real.
Those are real things that happen. People say, that's just something that you make up. Well, no, this is a real story that happened. And so that devastated him. If you don't have cash as a business owner, you can't operate. That shuts you down immediately. That's the difference in a community bank where we're looking eyeball to eyeball, and we see you throughout the week, and we want to make sure you're successful, because if our business owners aren't successful or our customers aren't successful, guess what? We don't win.
Again, that's a message for owners and other leaders watching this is, yeah, if our only thing we're deciding on choosing our bank is what's going to be the best thing for our business money market account or our operating account, and just looking at that interest rate, that again, what people need to understand, especially if they're going into startups, and we've learned this too, is those relationships, it's hard to even put a dollar amount on what the long-term value is going to be back to your business when making those decisions. And that's why, I asked that. I've got a question for you. You spent, which is rare, nowadays, regardless of how the age of the person, but staying somewhere for 33 years is a really testament to, your grit and your focus on growth for your career. It's really easy after 6 or 7 years. We definitely see this with more of a millennial generation to shift. It gets hard, or the avenue for growth dissipates, and we're going to just check something else entirely. But what advice do you have for young professionals coming up? The banking industry is huge. For someone who's interested, they're a college graduate or a high school graduate that want to go into banking, what would be your tips for success?
Here's what I would say, not only in banking, but in general: be willing to pay that front price. Too many younger people that we interview, they want my job right off the bat.
Yeah.
And
they want it in 1 year.
Or they want it in a year, right? The thing is what we see when people aren't ready for a position, we set them up for failure. You need the experience of going through different areas so that you can understand how to be a good advisor to the customer, because that's the value I have, is having that experience and knowing the things that I've seen in other situations. So being willing to learn on the job, grow at your rate, whatever that may be, and be ready for those larger positions when they come available.
And stay focused on that overall.
Jump from job to job. That's not going to get you where you want to be in the long run. If you want a career at something, stick with it. It's kind of like a marriage. We all have bad days in our marriage, right?
Yeah.
You don't just walk away, right? Yeah.
You shouldn't.
You shouldn't.
Yeah.
You shouldn't.
It's not going to solve the problem.
It's not going to solve the problem. Yeah. Same thing with work. You're not going to love every day at your job. I mean, that's just the humans that we are, right?
Yep.
But you forge through those times, right? Not to say that maybe you're not a fit where you're at, and you may need to leave if you're not a fit. But if you're just having a bad day or a few bad weeks, work through it. It has a lot of opportunities for those who are willing to work through it and stick it out. And it's been a very good career, like I said, to be able to keep me locally. I mean, that was one thing I looked at when I was looking at being a banker is, I didn't want to have to move to a larger city. I wanted to be able to live where I wanted to live, and there's just a quality of life there that I wanted to have.
Yeah, which is why you stayed with that. So obviously, Beacon Legacy Group, we do a variety of functions. One of our primary, functions is estate planning. We're estate planners. We help also with business owners, which is why we've come in contact with you as a lender. Oftentimes we're working with business owners on succession planning, could be startup planning, quite frankly, or as a subset of their overall marital estate plan. They've got this business or an LLC or an S corp or a sole proprietorship that they've also got to handle. Another part of our estate planning involves, capacity. All right. So power of attorneys are really critical to avoid conservatorships and other things. Meanwhile, at a bank, someone might have, a checking account, a savings account, a CD, a variety of, of things. And, fraud, unfortunately, undue influence and duress with our aging population, unfortunately becomes more common. Yes, there's online scammers and things like that, which I'm sure you set a front row seat to. There's also other individuals and people's families. What are some protections and measures that kind of you all have in place for those folks in the trenches that are seeing these things coming through the door, at a local branch?
Okay. We kind of unpacked a lot of stuff there. So I'm going to say right here that estate planning or business planning is a must, and that goes from someone who has very little to someone who has a lot, okay? Because what we've seen in the bank is the worst time is when something happens to someone and there's not a plan in place.
Yeah.
You can say, well, Johnny knew what to do if this happened. Well, guess what? If you don't have it in writing, there's nothing I can do to help.
Yeah.
If Johnny's not on an account, or maybe you put Johnny on an account because Johnny knows what to do, well, guess what? Johnny gets mad and he leaves Susie and Joe out of everything.
Absolutely.
And doesn't do what you wish. So having those plans in place is essential. As a business, let's switch gears to that. As a business owner, say we're a partnership, guess what? If a partner dies, there needs to be a plan in place for how that happens. And most of the time, the family that's left of the partner that dies, they don't have the cash to buy the other person out. So what's that do to a partnership? So if you don't make plans for those kind of things, that's when we see issues at the bank.
And they're very painful. And we can just reiterate, what you're saying there is people think it won't happen to them. Well, failure to have a succession plan is the number one death knell to small businesses in the country. A lot of those that could have stayed operational don't because of that. And secondly, no one thinks that Alzheimer's, dementia, stroke, Parkinson's, all these fun comorbidities aren't going to happen to them. And again, you mentioned on the titling of assets with, joint or co-ownership versus having a power of attorney versus having an estate plan. These things work in concert. Again, why it's so great that we have relationships we can call a local bank, with permission, with the client's permission and on your end, but to see what's going on. But people need to understand that POD beneficiaries, joint ownership, how those will interact with your power of attorney in your overall trust or will. Those are complex issues, and we got to ensure that those are done properly. And, you pretty much just answered that on why it can really dramatically.
That's exactly right. But the point of fraud, I didn't answer that part.
Okay, yeah.
Absolutely. The bank has, there's software and things that help us detect fraud. But I'll tell you the biggest thing as a community bank is the fact that we know Tyler, okay? So we know Tyler's habits a lot of times.
Yep.
Tyler may come to the bank every week. Well, Tyler starts doing things that are odd in his transactions. So that may be an alert.
Yeah.
Tyler's going to wire a bunch of money to somebody that is off the wall.
Yeah.
Somebody out of country. That's a cue for us to ask questions. And if those questions go down the wrong road, I mean, there's things that we refer to authorities and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But all these things are for the protection of the person that we're dealing with. You don't get that when all you do is call a bank or all you do is electronic things with the bank.
Another example, once again, of having that personal connection, whether it's with the senior vice president or that local, individual that they work with there at the front desk, is if someone's got a large account at USAA or whatever, or they're banking online and they make that wire is likely to go through, or it could go through, right? It might not, and we know they do. Those do happen. Well, let me. I'd like to kind of end our first series here with you, Kevin, with as it pertains to leadership, and that's a really big concept. But what is the biggest thing that's helped you as a leader, and the biggest thing that you would say is the mark of a good leader?
Okay, I think in general, treating people fairly. Okay, and when I say fairly, I mean not emotionally. Okay.
Yep.
Because I can be emotional about something and think I'm being fair, and that's not really fair perceived on your end, is it?
No.
Fairness to me is that thing when you take the emotions out of it, what's the right thing to do in a situation? And there typically is a right and a wrong thing to do.
That's a hard thing to do.
That is a hard thing, and it's not always easy to do. And to give you an example is, I can say, well, Tyler, you have a bad attitude. Well, what's attitude? That's subjective, isn't it? Very subjective, right? Or I can say, Tyler, when I ask you to close the building and you roll your eyes and blow at me, here's what this does to the team members, everybody else that sees that, blah, 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 blah. And go down
we took that subjective to objective there.
Right.
What happened?
Right. I can either be mad at you and say, well, you got a terrible attitude, which is not productive for either of us. Or I can say, here's what you're doing. And you may not even realize you're rolling your eyes when you do it. And then at least gives the conversation an open door for us, right?
Yeah.
So
that makes a lot of sense. And as they always say in the military, leadership's not likership. You got to be a leader. And that doesn't always mean, again, just playing to someone's emotions or making someone like you. You're just doing a disservice to your organization. Well, thanks so much. This kind of concludes our first Leadership Across the Table series with Kevin. I appreciate.
Well, I
you coming
appreciate
out.
you having me. Thanks,
Yeah,
Tyler.
thanks, Kevin.
All right.
Look forward to working with you in the future.